Hope your weekend was fantastic. We have some Xfinity Series news to talk about today, and we're going to be speculating about future Cup Series silly seasonness. Should be fun. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Again, I hope your weekend was great. I'm sure it was great for a lot of drivers in the Truck and Xfinity Series. Friday night was the awards ceremony banquet for the Trucks and Xfinity Series. It wasn't broadcast on TV. I think it'll be broadcast next week sometime. But there we saw some of the stars from the Trucks and Xfinity Series, come together, celebrate each other's champions, and we got to hear some interesting quotes from some of them. Today's episode, however, is going to primarily focus on one of those drivers, Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson is one of the more talented young drivers in NASCAR. He spent the last 2 years driving in the Truck Series for Busch Motorsports. Been pretty good. He won 2 races. He made it to the championship 4 this year. Didn't quite win it. But yeah, today's episode is going to talk about him mostly because he made some interesting comments, and I want to make some comparisons and speculate a little bit about these comments. But I think you guys will find this interesting because he's talking about Dale Jr. and Kyle Busch and comparing them as team owners. Now, before I talk about what Gragson specifically said, I'll give you some background information. I mentioned that Noah Gragson spent the last 2 years driving for Busch Motorsports in the Truck Series. He announced just a few months ago that he will be driving for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series starting in 2019. He's going over there to drive the 1 car, which is actually going to be the 9 car from this last season. They're rebranding it to the 1, but Gragson will be in the 1 for Junior Motorsports, now driving a Chevy in the Xfinity Series full time. Interesting that he didn't stay in the Toyota JGR development system and instead went over to Chevy and Junior Motorsports and Hendrick, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. Y'all might have seen this floating around on Twitter or somewhere else a little bit, but one of the most interesting comments Gragson made, he said that Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kyle Busch are polar opposites. I'm going to go ahead and read for you his full quote because I think, it provides some context. He said, "I definitely think going through that growth spurt over at Busch Motorsports helped me. Kyle, he's one of the most talented race car drivers in all of NASCAR, period. Can't argue it. It is what it is. He's one of the best. And to be able to learn from him and ask him questions, hey man, what are you doing on restarts? What are you doing getting into the pit box with your feet on the brake pedal and clutch pedal and all that? That type of experience to lean on is priceless." He then goes on to say something a little more interesting. "For myself personally, I feel like Dale and I have a lot of similarities. I think I can be even more myself going over to Junior Motorsports. I just really enjoy the atmosphere over there with all the guys. It's more of a laid-back atmosphere, and it's a bit of a change for me. It's just a different environment. Not saying one's right, one's wrong." Now, I know that was a long quote, kind of a lot of meaningless words there, but there's a couple things I want to single out, a couple key words specifically that kind of perk my ears up. It's the part where he refers to the fact that he can be more himself at Junior Motorsports and that it's a more laid-back atmosphere when compared to his previous time with Kyle Busch. Now, I might be reading too much into this, but I don't really think I am. When he refers to Dale Jr. being more laid-back and that he can be more himself over at Junior Motorsports, it just makes him sound undisciplined. The fact that, maybe he likes that about this team, but he didn't like how intense Kyle Busch was. I don't know, when you're a young driver getting into the sport, trying to get your wits about you, I feel like the intensive kind of training that Kyle Busch maybe was putting him through is better for you. It makes it sound like he couldn't handle that and he's just glad he's at a more relaxed atmosphere like Junior Motorsports, and that doesn't make me super confident. Obviously, he's one of the most talented drivers, has a ton of potential, but when he immediately refers to the fact that he prefers a laid-back atmosphere, it makes him sound undisciplined and like he craves independence. All that's fine and good, but when you're a young driver who, doesn't have a whole lot of experience, he's only 20 years old, I don't know, it makes me feel concerned. Noah Gragson has a history of making aggressive mistakes. I could show you all these clips from just this year. This one at Dover, 2 laps to go, he wrecks himself battling for the lead. Or remember earlier this year at Canada when he and his teammate were battling for the lead around the final corner and Gragson dumps them both and they both ended up losing the race to a non-teammate. That one probably wasn't all Gragson's fault, but he took the blame for it, so it makes me think it was mostly his fault. It was an aggressive move and it was obviously a mistake. Here he is late in the race at Talladega trying to make a block, causes a big wreck. Or again, here's another one, he just spins out into a playoff driver. Noah Gragson, he's made aggressive mistakes. He's been in the Truck Series now for 2 years, driving the best equipment. He's only got 2 wins. And he's made a lot of aggressive mistakes. He reminds me a lot of a young Kyle Busch. A ton of potential, but at some point, someone's gonna have to sit him down and really teach him how to finish and how to run NASCAR races. Right now, he seems undisciplined, and that's why when he says something like, "Oh, I like the laid-back atmosphere at Junior Motorsports," I'm like, I don't think that's what's best for you, man. A laid-back atmosphere is something you look for when you've established yourself as a good driver, a good competitor, you've already had some success. Yeah, at that point, you've hit your stride, you can lay back a little bit. No, Gragson, his mindset needs to be, I'm still grinding for anything. There's not gonna be a lot of opportunities in the Cup Series available to him. He's gonna need to work as hard as he can, always needs to be improving, and a laid-back atmosphere doesn't sound like that. Obviously, I don't mean to say Junior Motorsports is like not gonna get him Cup Series ready. I mean, they've had Chase Elliott go through that system, William Byron go through that system. They know how to make great drivers, so I'm not saying he's gonna fail because he's at Junior Motorsports, but I don't know, I just don't like this quote. Like I said, he does remind me a lot of a young Kyle Busch. You know, Kyle Busch came to the series, ton of potential, looked great early on, winning races as a rookie, but it took him 11 years to finally learn how to run a full season, how to finish races. It took him 11 years before he finally won a championship. Countless Xfinity wins, countless truck wins, a lot of Cup wins too, but it took him 11 years to win a Cup Series championship. And when you look at some of these other drivers, I'm gonna give you a list here. I did some research. Jimmie Johnson won a championship in his 4th year. Tony Stewart won a championship in only his 4th year. Jeff Gordon won a championship in only his 3rd year. Matt Kenseth also won a championship in his 4th year. Brad Keselowski won a championship in just his 3rd full-time season. Now you look at that list of drivers, I think there's no doubt all of them are going to be Hall of Famers one day. Jimmie Johnson, arguably the greatest driver ever. Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon are right there in that mix. That's the group you want to be a part of. And unfortunately, Noah Gragson's reminding me more of Kyle Busch, who's a part of this group. Kyle Busch is great, but he was so inconsistent it took him 11 years to win a championship. Kevin Harvick, who I feel like is also kind of similar to Kyle Busch in a lot of ways, took him 14 years to finally win a championship. And Joey Logano, who's had his run-ins with guys, took him 10 years as well. You know, what do those 3 drivers have in common? They get into a lot of altercations, they have issues on the track with people all the time, and it's just kind of a consistent thing. It took them a lot longer than these other stars to win championships. You could just see when Jimmie Johnson came to the Cup Series, he was just mature. You knew he knew what to do right away. Same with Jeff Gordon, same with Matt Kenseth, same with Tony Stewart. The difference is you compare that to a guy like Kyle Busch, he had a ton of talent when he first came to the Cup Series, but it took him a long time to kind of refine that talent and really learn how to win, win consistently. And the thing I'm seeing with Noah Gragson right now is he reminds me more of that group that took 10, 11, 12 years to win championships, and less like the group that won a championship in their first few years. Not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, honestly, if he grows up to be as good as Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, I mean, he's going to have a Hall of Fame career, so that's not the worst thing in the world. But Jimmie Johnson, Jeff Gordon, I'd rather strive to be like them. I mean, those are 2 of the top 5 drivers in NASCAR history. I'd want to be like them. No offense to Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick. Jimmie Johnson and Jeff Gordon are better. I told you this episode was going to be largely Noah Gragson dominated, but hopefully you guys will find this interesting. You know, at the end of the day, Noah Gragson made the right move switching from Kyle Busch Motorsports over to Junior Motorsports. That was a great decision. I think it was a genius decision. I just wish he didn't act like the laid-back atmosphere was one of the most appealing parts of it. But yeah, moving to Chevy, moving to the Junior Motorsports Hendrick thing was a great deal for him. You know, if he'd stayed with Joe Gibbs Racing, you know, he would have been the 2nd best driver in their Xfinity Series program. You know, Joe Gibbs Racing is stacked with talent. In the Cup Series side, Kyle Busch isn't going anywhere. Eric Jones just got there and he's cheap. He's not going anywhere. Martin Truex Jr., they're just now bringing in. He just won a championship a year ago. He's not going anywhere for at least a couple of years. Denny Hamlin, depending on FedEx sponsorship money and contract negotiations, maybe he'll be out in a year or 2. But, you know, look right now, in Gibbs' Xfinity program, who's the first guy on their list is Christopher Bell. So, you know, Christopher Bell might take that ride, but it's going to be years before, you know, Noah Gragson or anybody else would have had a shot at the Cup Series. By moving over to Junior Motorsports and kind of getting in Hendrick's development program, he's now the first guy on their list. I mean, look at their Xfinity program. Justin Allgaier's not going to the Cup Series. You know, Michael Annette's not going to the Cup Series anytime soon. Noah Gragson is now the next in line to get a Cup Series ride once one becomes available. And guess whose contract is up in just 2 years? We talked about this just recently. Jimmie Johnson. The theory that's being thrown around, and I think it's a pretty legit one, is that in 2 years after the year 2020, when Jimmie Johnson steps down and retires from full-time NASCAR, Noah Gragson will be the driver to move into the 48. Now that's kind of where I want to end my thing with Noah Gragson here, and that's why I say it relates to, you know, future silly season predictions. People want to know when Jimmie Johnson's leaving. That contract ending in 2020 seems to open the door for Noah Gragson to get a top Cup Series ride. I don't know how people are going to feel about that. Noah Gragson stepping into the famed 48 car. Don't know how people are going to feel about that, but he's got a couple of years to earn more people's respect. I'm obviously rooting for Noah Gragson. I have no reason not to root for him. You know, I don't have anything against him. Never met the guy. He seems like he's good enough. I just think it's interesting when he makes these comments about how Dale Jr. versus Kyle Busch. Jr., oh, he's much more laid back. I feel like that fits my style. I just don't know if that's really what you want a young driver who still needs his skills refined. I don't think that's what you want him to be saying. Maybe I'm just an old geezer saying this, like, oh, those darn kids need to listen and respect their elders, but I'm just kind of like, you know, I do feel that way a little bit. You know, the idea that, you know, Kyle Busch is hands-on, really teaching him, you know, was too much for him, and he prefers the laid-back route, just makes him sound undisciplined, and I hope that he's able to maybe get something squared out and he can end up having a career closer to that of Jimmie Johnson, Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, and maybe less like, you know, Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, who's had great careers, but, you know, it took him a long time to really figure out how to win at NASCAR's top level. You know, That's just me. Anyway, you guys, hopefully you enjoyed that video. I've liked this off-season because I've been able to talk a little bit more about, the lower level stuff, lower level series. During the regular season, I'm almost always talking about the Cup Series because every week there's a new race, there's new news stories, and I really only have time to focus on NASCAR's top series. But now with the off-season and news coming out in all 3 series that kind of relate to each other, like this one I just talked about, had a little bit of every series mixed in, I think is great. I'm glad I get to talk about more of it. Hopefully you guys enjoy hearing me talk about some of these drivers that maybe I don't always get a chance to discuss. So thanks for watching. I know there's some other news floating around out there. I'll try to get to some of that this week. There's honestly been too much for me to even keep up with. I've heard Jamie McMurray is planning to run the Daytona 500 with Chip Ganassi. That's been rumored for a while, but I believe that is now confirmed. And yeah, there's other stuff. I hopefully can get to more of it this week. Yeah, thanks for watching. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all those as usual, or you can become a Patreon sponsor of the show, like at GWiz of the Stars, Mentally Defective, Michael Harrison, Cameron James, Tice Moore, and our other amazing Patreon supporters. I'd love to see that this list keeps growing because that helps me out a ton, and I really, really appreciate it. So check that at top link down below if you also want to be a supporter of the show. Thank you so much. P.O. Box down there as well. If you want to send me some cool NASCAR stuff, I will show it off and shout you out in a future upcoming video. Shouldn't be too long before I do one of those. So yeah, check out that P.O. Box down below. Thank you so much. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'll be back probably sooner rather than later with another one. Thanks as always, everyone, and I will see you. I'll see you then.